This wasn't just an attack. It was a violation. In 2009, Randy Orton crossed a line many thought was sacred and, in doing so, changed the game for WWE storytelling. But this infamous moment wasn't a random act of villainy. It was the terrifying final stop on a perfectly told story of hate. The image is burned into the memory of every fan who saw it. Triple H, the King of Kings, reduced to a screaming, helpless man, handcuffed to the ring ropes. In the center of the ring lies his wife, Stephanie McMahon, completely unconscious. And standing over her is Randy Orton, a predator savoring his victory. He stoops down and delivers a kiss that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. By 2009, Randy Orton was a far cry from the promising but somewhat clean-cut rookie he started as. He'd evolved. First, he was the legend killer, a prodigy who took out icon after icon. But this new version of Orton was something much, much darker. This was the apex predator, a cold, calculating psychopath whose every move was deliberate and whose anger was a quiet, venomous fire. He was the leader of a new faction, the Legacy, flanked by fellow second-generation wrestlers Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase Jr. They were arrogant, entitled, and under Orton's leadership, ruthlessly effective. Their goal? To build their own legacy by destroying the establishment. And in early 2009, they set their sights on the ultimate symbol of that establishment, the McMahon family. The fuse was lit that January. After Orton disrespected Stephanie McMahon, her father, Vince McMahon, stormed back to Raw to publicly fire him. Standing in the ring, staring down the most powerful man in wrestling, Orton didn't flinch. He didn't beg for his job. Instead, he slapped a chairman across the face and then delivered the most vicious weapon in his arsenal, the punt kick. It was the ultimate act of defiance and attack on the patriarch of the whole company. The message was crystal clear. No one was safe. This, of course, brought out Vince's son Shane to defend the family's honor. Shane, who was famous for his willingness to take an insane amount of punishment, went after Orton in a series of wild brawls. But Orton, with a legacy watching his back, was too much. The feud hit another horrifying peak when Orton punted Shane into unconsciousness, just like he did to his father. And as Stephanie McMahon ran to her brother's side, Orton dropped her with a vicious RKO. That was the last straw. For weeks, Triple H Stephanie's on-screen and real-life husband had been kept out of this family drama. The story was that as a competitor, he was separate from the Machaman's corporate business. But seeing his wife get laid out with an RKO changed everything. This wasn't about business anymore. This was personal. The very next week, Triple H hit the arena like a man possessed, and the war with Randy Orton was officially on. That's when Orton laid his cards on the table. This wasn't random chaos. Everything, the attack on Vince, the beatdown of Shane, the RKO on Stephanie, was all part of a calculated campaign of revenge. Revenge for what happened years ago when Triple H and Evolution betrayed him, kicking him out of the group just one night after he became the youngest world heavyweight champion in history. That betrayal had been eating away at Orton for years. Now he was finally getting his payback, not just on Triple H the wrestler, but on everything he loved. He was tearing his family apart, piece by piece, and forcing Triple H to watch. This is what made the story so brilliant. It leaned into the real-life, publicly known marriage of Triple H and Stephanie, blurring the lines between the characters and the real people. It gave Orton a deep, understandable reason for his evil actions, even as fans were horrified. This wasn't just good versus evil. It was a story about years of resentment and psychological warfare. Orton wasn't just trying to win a title. He was trying to mentally and emotionally break Triple H before they even got to WrestleMania. This weekly escalation of personal attacks built a level of tension you rarely see. Fans knew something big was coming. They just had no idea it would be this dark. The night of March 23, 2009, had a feeling of pure dread hanging over it. The main event was set, Triple H in a 2-on-1 handicap match against the Legacy's Ted DiBiase and Cody Rhodes. Randy Orton was, for the moment, nowhere in sight. The match was a brutal, chaotic fight for survival for Triple H, but it was always a trap. The numbers game was designed to wear him down and isolate him, and it worked. When Randy Orton finally made his entrance, Triple H's fate was sealed. The 3-on-1 beatdown was merciless. But for Orton, a simple assault wasn't the point. Physical pain was just the appetizer for the psychological torment he was about to serve. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. As Triple H fought with every last bit of strength, the numbers were just too much. Legacy overpowered him, and Orton snapped the cold steel around his wrist, chaining him to the top rope. The game, one of the most dominant forces in WWE history, was completely and utterly helpless. All he could do was watch, his face a mask of primal rage, as Orton turned his attention to his real target. Stephanie McMahon, who had come to the ring to support her husband, was now cornered by the monster who had terrorized her family for months. She stared him down without a trace of fear, but it was no use. Orton grabbed her. Triple H screamed, straining against the cuffs, muscles bulging as he tried to snap the steel, but it wouldn't give. Then, with a chillingly calm expression, Orton lifted Stephanie and dropped her with a sickening DDT. She lay motionless. The arena went quiet with horror. The violence was bad enough, but what happened next went beyond the normal rules of a wrestling story. This was the moment that would define Orton, the feud, and an entire era. He looked from Stephanie's unconscious body to Triple H, a sadistic smile slowly spreading across his face. He was enjoying every second of the agony he was causing. Then he leaned down, and he kissed her. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was cold, predatory. A violation. It was the ultimate act of disrespect, a symbolic conquest designed to shatter Triple H's soul. It was Orton saying, "I've taken everything from you. I can do whatever I want to your wife, right in front of you, and you can't do a damn thing to stop me." The roar of rage from Triple H was gut-wrenching. It was the sound of a man breaking. Behind the scenes, the segment was tense for a completely different reason. It was incredibly awkward. Randy Orton has talked openly about how uncomfortable he was shooting the scene. He admitted on a podcast with Stephanie McMahon herself that he was a nervous wreck. Here he was, in his late 20s, having to rehearse this deeply personal, violating act with his boss's daughter. In front of his boss, Vince McMahon, and her husband, Triple H Orton recalled Vince meticulously planning out the scene, making sure the DDT happened just far enough away that the handcuffed Triple H had no chance of reaching them. Orton said he was so embarrassed he could barely even say the word kiss and was secretly praying they'd run out of time and have to cut the segment. But Triple H, ever the professional, knew how important this was for the story. He understood its power and wanted it to mean as much as possible. And it did. The moment was a masterpiece of villainy. It wasn't about violence. It was about violation. It ensured the hero's lowest point wasn't a physical loss, but a moment of deep psychological humiliation. Damian Priest later called it one of the most villainous and wildest moments in WWE history, a feeling shared by millions of fans who watched, stunned, as Randy Orton cemented his legacy. What did you think when you first saw this? Was it the most shocking moment you'd ever seen in WWE? Let us know down in the comments. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into wrestling history, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next breakdown. The fallout from the kiss was immediate and explosive. The very next week, WWE cameras followed Triple H as he invaded Randy Orton's home. leading to an out-of-control brawl that ended with Orton being thrown through a plate glass window. This wasn't a wrestling feud anymore. It was a war. The story had become so personal and so hot that a regular match just wouldn't cut it. The build to their WWE Championship match at WrestleMania 25 was one of the most personal and exciting in years. The story was perfect. The psychopathic villain who terrorized a family versus the avenging hero fighting for his wife's honor. There was just one problem. The climax didn't quite stick the landing. The WrestleMania 25 main event is often remembered as a letdown. In what many still consider a baffling decision, a rule was added that if Triple H got disqualified, he would lose the title. This forced a match that needed to be a violent, lawless war to become a slow, traditional wrestling contest. It completely neutered the raw intensity that had been built for months. While Triple H got his revenge by beating Orton, the match itself failed to deliver the brutal, satisfying ending the story deserved. Of course, the rivalry didn't end there. Orton would win the title a month later at Backlash, and their war would rage on through the summer. But it's the kiss that has outlasted the memory of any of their matches. That one, singular act is the feud's true legacy. So why does this moment still hit so hard? Because it changed the playbook for main event storytelling. In what was supposed to be the PG era, this segment pushed the boundaries of psychological horror. It showed a willingness to blur the lines between performance and reality in a way that felt dangerous and unpredictable. The feud wasn't just about a belt. It was about family, honor, and a personal hatred that felt real. It took the real-life marriage of Triple H and Stephanie and used it to create stakes that felt higher than any championship. You can draw a straight line from the psychological warfare of this 2009 feud to the family drama of the Bloodline today. Both storylines get their power from weaponizing real-life relationships and emotions, making the conflict feel deeper than a simple athletic contest. The Orton-McMahon segment proved that the most effective villains don't always commit the most brutal acts of violence, but the most intimate acts of cruelty. It was the perfect storm. Randy Orton at the absolute peak of his sadistic character, a believable backstory fueling his hatred, and a moment of violation so shocking it could never be forgotten. It was uncomfortable, it was awkward, and it was diabolical. And it was a moment that made you feel the hero's pain in a visceral way, turning a wrestling angle into a gripping piece of television. In the history of WWE, there have been countless betrayals and shocking attacks. But few have ever been as psychologically terrifying and uncomfortably personal as Randy Orton kissing an unconscious Stephanie McMahon. It was a moment that didn't need blood or over-the-top violence to be horrifying. It ran on pure, uncut emotional cruelty. It cemented Randy Orton as one of the greatest villains of his generation and set a new benchmark for what a personal feud could be. The payoff match at WrestleMania may have fallen short, but the road to get there was a masterclass in storytelling, all culminating in a single act of villainy so profound that it's still seared into the memory of fans today. Where does this rank for you on the list of all-time most shocking WE moments? Thanks for watching.